Well, to understand more about the judgment and what legal options lie ahead for the community, we are joined by Anjali Gopalan, a human rights activist and the founder and executive director of the Naz Foundation, and also by Geeta Bhatt, professor of the University of Delhi. Anjali Gopalan, if I could just start with you. You've had a couple of days to digest the judgment. What do you think lies ahead? What are the next steps?
Well, clearly there's a tremendous sense of disappointment, right? Because I think this was an opportunity the courts had to at least look at some civil rights for the community. I understand the pushback on marriage. I get it that people go into a tizzy around the institution of marriage and they don't want to touch it and all of that. But to deny rights to citizens, to deny rights to certain citizens based on who they love or who they're with really doesn't make sense to me. But having said that, to me, the really sad bit is not doing anything around civil rights.
Well, Geeta ji, the verdict that Anjali ji is describing as sad has been, of course, welcomed by other sections of society, and they're saying that it was the right thing to have done. Why do you think this was a good judgment?
What is my perception about this, this whole case being filed and a constitution bench which being constituted for looking into this, regular hearings taking place, and the demand to basically make this incorporation in the Special Marriage Act. Because you see, if we want to bring these kind of provisions, then there is a very thorough exercise that needs to be done in terms of looking into various provisions of law. Because there are various provisions of laws which provide protection to women. And even today, women itself, they are also in many ways very vulnerable community and they need protection. So without going through that exercise, taking a shortcut by asking that provision to be made in the Special Marriage Act, where the Special Marriage Act itself was brought so that the religious identities of individuals could be protected while they get into a union.
Right, and what you're saying is essentially what the judgment said, and it's on the question of marriage, and it comes to the Special Marriage Act. And I'm going to be trying to see in the next 5-10 minutes where there's a possibility of moving forward in other areas and where there is actually no consensus. So, Anjali, if I could actually come back to you, what Geeta ji just said is what the courts were saying about the problems when it comes to marriage, the problems of amending the Special Marriage Act, the fact that it's eventually for Parliament to try and figure out all of those complexities around the question of marriage. So, yes, on marriage, there are certain issues. Do you agree with that particular point, the point that was being made by Geeta ji right now about how it would have been tough to have amended the Special Marriage Act?
It's her thinking, it's her opinion, it's her belief, and that's fine. All I'm saying is that the courts could have looked at civil rights. They could have looked at civil unions. So the benefits of marriage which are denied to the community, and the trans community is a little bit outside of this now, because the courts very clearly that, they clarified what the NALSA judgment had given. And it clearly said that as a trans person, today you can marry another trans person or a cisgender person. You can marry a heterosexual person, right? So I think it's a bit different for the trans community. But the rest of the community have been denied very basic rights. Now, Vikram, something as small as if your partner is sick and in hospital, the right to take care of them can also be denied to an individual.
But it sounds to me, Geeta ji, if I can just read between the lines of what you're saying, is that if this government committee actually does come forward and give the sort of rights that Anjali ji was talking about, it's not that there would be a lot of objection to that. You also agree that certain rights and certain protections should be provided to people of a different sexual orientation.
Yeah, definitely. This kind of a provision where, for example, like Anjali ji said that, if one is hospitalized and, one have to, but there were various other arguments like, you can't open a bank account together and That is, I mean, you see, there are various other laws which do make these kind of provision, like two people coming together and opening a bank account. I mean, there is no legal barring on it. Any two people can come together and open a bank account, right? Buy a property. You can write a will for anyone, of your choice. So these type of provisions are already there. But yes, some, for example, this particular case where there is a hospitalization and you have to kind of sign on the, on the papers for some kind of exigency, emergency. Then these kind of, but some of the provisions I feel which already are taken within the ambit of the various provisions which are already there in the law.
Anjali,
for buying of property, for example, two people can buy property together. I mean, for that, you don't need any special provision.
So, but you can't buy it as a couple. So, and there are therefore other consequences to that, no? So the whole idea is what you can do as a couple becomes very important.
So,
and
just to understand,
Geeta ji, it's not easy to open a bank account as a couple. It's not easy. It doesn't exist. We have to constantly fight in the banks to get a couple to open an account together. Doesn't happen.
I think the reason I'm trying to figure out to see if there's any possible consensus and a possible way forward is because for a lot of people in the LGBTQ community, it's a sense of it's the end of the world after that particular judgment. It's all dark. I'm just trying to see if there's a glimmer of light in the rulings. So, Anjali ji, supposing this committee is to give some sort of a ruling on certain rights, and also the possibility that then gets thrown open is, let's see if there can be some sort of a law around possible civil union, what the minority judgment was hoping for, asking for. Do you think that would make people feel a lot more hopeful?
I think so. I think so. It would be a step forward. It's not what people aspire to, and many people do want marriage equality, right? And of course, it's not a monolith community. So there are some who say, fine, this is fine with us, but the rest will say we do want marriage. Now, the whole thing around marriage is what? Is that society, in a culture like us, society accepts you as a couple. It's a way to show someone you really care about them and love them and all the rest of those good things. But the way I look at it, even if the rights that we've discussed, if that happens, if this committee that we were talking about ensures that these rights are given to the community, I think it'll be a one step forward.
All right, on the question of adoption, which was the other somewhat sensitive question, in which again there was a divergence of views in the judgment. The majority said no to adoption, the minority view said yes, it should be there. Geeta ji, what would be the problems with adoption? Why do you feel that adoption rights should not be provided?
See, adoption is something which I think some time back government also came out, in the adoption policy and in the act, they made certain amendments to ensure that the adoption takes place, in a rightful manner. And because you see, it is important to understand that when the law is trying to protect a child, it is by assuming that the child is not capable of going into any kind of a contract. Is not capable of going into a contract. And also, children, they cannot be exposed, or how do you expose them to gender fluidity? And there were in the judgment, when there were arguments going on, there were various studies which were submitted, which are there in the judgment, and these studies have been conducted outside India, but they, in a way, they were pointing to the fact that those children who have been brought up in a union where there are people of alternate orientations, the results were not very positive, and this has been submitted even in the court. There are, the kind of misuse that can happen when if such provisions are made for adoption, is something that needs to be very, very carefully undertaken, because this could be really misused. So that is why, I mean, one has to be very, very cautious if one is asking for adoption, and the legislation has to look into drafting, if they ever come out with any such provision, in a very, very careful manner, because this can be really misused.
But that is misused by anyone, right? Why are you saying it will only be misused by a certain community? Number two, the way our adoption laws are right now, single people can adopt. If you're in a live-in relationship, you can't. And now, of course, if you are from the LGBTQ, not the T, but the rest of the community, you can't. Now, there, as you said, some studies were produced in the court, but I can give you a slew of studies which says exactly the opposite of that. We have many friends who are bringing up children in a really loving, caring environment, because that's what children want. So to assume that just because you are of the same sex, you can't provide that kind of environment is wrong. Actually, if you sit in those family courts, if you've ever been to Delhi family court, it's one of the most bizarre things to go through. Here there are married couples, and what they put their children through is a big problem. So this whole assumption that we have, I think the response is a very visceral response, right? But if you think it through a bit logically, and I agree with you, of course, adoption laws should be well drafted and make sure that the protection of the child is key to it, right? But the assumption, I think, is problematic. And those laws are critical. They are important. I'm not saying no. But please believe me when I say that in this country, I run a home for children who are orphaned, and I know what happens to these children. They are languishing in orphanages when there are so many homes and so many people who will provide that loving, caring environment for them. So why is it that, what is holding us back? What are we scared about? I agree with you. Make it stringent, make the laws strong. We must have strong laws. We must protect our children. But don't do what we're doing right now.
All right, Anjali Gopalan and Geeta Bhatt, thank you so much for joining us.